Hi there, and welcome to the latest interview as part of A Cup of Tea With. I'm Stephen Leftak, Executive Editor of The Drum, and in this interview, I'm delighted to be joined by the British media legend, the icon that is Noel Edmonds. Noel, thank you for joining me.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I'm not sure I'm an icon, but thank you for the compliment. I think it was a compliment, was it?
Yes, certainly was. It was meant as one. Anyway.
Well, that's very kind of you.
So I have my cup of tea ready. Noel, what do you have there?
I have to confess, Stephen, I don't have a cup of tea here because where I am in the Southern Hemisphere, it is mid-evening, it's 8 in the evening, and I have a small glass of Chardonnay from the local vineyard.
Good on you. I mean, that would be my first question. Where are you right now? Can you tell our viewers where you are currently and why you're there?
Certainly, I am in a country called New Zealand, referred to by some people as the Long White Cloud, an extraordinary pair of main islands, with lots of smaller islands around them, situated in the Southern Hemisphere in such a way that quite often people leave it off maps. It's funny how often you look at a world map and New Zealand's vanished. But I came here last year and with my wife, Liz, and with our 16-year-old Harrison. And we have a home currently about an hour's drive north of Auckland, which is in the North Island. And we are out by the coast in a wonderful region of Matakana. And were it not pitch black outside, I would be able to look from the desk I'm sitting at in my study and see the Pacific Ocean. It is paradise.
Lovely. And so I having followed your career for as long as I have, I can't imagine you're not doing something. So what are you up to in New Zealand?
Well, I think if you've got the time, I'll just backtrack. And that was that I've always been somebody interested. I've always been very interested in other countries, and I had a house in France from 2005. I spent quite a bit of time going backwards and forwards between the UK and France. So I've never been sort of a typical 100% UK person. And it was in about 2015 when I felt that Deal or No Deal was coming to a logical conclusion. 10 years, nearly 3,000 shows, Channel 4, Endemol, and I felt it was coming to the end of its natural life. And that coincided with Liz and I feeling that maybe Europe was no longer where we wanted to have our home. And we both talked about it and came up with the idea. We'd never been to New Zealand. We'd heard a lot about it. So in 2016, we came here for a holiday for 3 weeks. And it was an extraordinary experience, Stephen, because both of us felt we had come home. We felt an immediate engagement with this country, with its people. And so when we had the very first opportunity, we came back in 2018 for Christmas with our son Harrison. He got it as well. And we returned to the UK and sold up everything. And moved here last year, 2019. And we are, dare I say it, given that so many people are suffering at this time, we are blissfully happy.
And am I correct in thinking that just before lockdown happened in New Zealand, you were granted permanent visas?
Yes, it's quite difficult to get in here, to be honest. And when you're my age, over 70, they make it extremely difficult for you to get in. But we qualified, and we got a lovely bit of paper. It's a bit of a tatty bit of paper, to be honest. I was hoping for something a little bit more dramatic and, really thick card with a crest or whatever. But it kind of looks like an old-fashioned piece of fax paper. But we are legitimate residents here. So unless we do something awful, they can't throw us out. And then, of course, immediately, because of this current situation we have, we were put under house arrest almost. Level 4 security here came crashing in. And it was, dare I say it, pretty damn good here. The house we've got has got a lot of ground. As I say, the ocean is nearby. We were able to exercise on running up and down the beach, cycling in the area. We, like everybody here, took lockdown very seriously indeed. And we've now gone to level 2, and they're talking about level 1 within 3 weeks. And I see today the Minister of Health was saying they felt they could say they had eradicated the virus, which seems to me a bold thing to say, but they've tackled it in a very bold way.
And while you've been on lockdown, you have, as usual, been busy. You started a radio network of 100 stations, is that correct?
Yeah, well, I've been involved in digital online radio for some time, and I've got a fantastic team around the world, but principally in Europe, and we've been developing all sorts of media projects online. And when I started to think about this country, which is now my homeland, and how it will come out of the lockdown, I realized it's going to have some major challenges. I mean, the economy has been decimated. Certainly, one of their biggest contributors to GDP, the tourist industry, has been completely destroyed for the moment. And I thought, well, why don't we create a network of community radio stations online to promote New Zealand and to bring together communities and offer businesses the chance to communicate their offerings and also support the vulnerable people in society. So I talked to my team in Europe and said, could we do 100? Could we do 100 stations, and how long would it take? And they, of course, went, oh, Christ, Edmonds has gone off on one again. But actually, they pulled it together in an incredible short period of time. And with my new Kiwi friends, I said, well, would this go down well? And they said, bloody hell, yes. There's a real can-do attitude here. And so within 6 weeks, we had created Positivity Radio New Zealand, and we have 3 major stations, which we call sort of the mother and the sister stations of Positively New Zealand itself and North Island and South Island. And they're outward looking. They've got lots of tourist information. They are very upbeat, great music, and lots of positive affirmations. And the idea is that when people will be able to come here, they'll come here realizing this is actually the most positive place on earth. And then we have all these community stations. Now, we launched it about 10 days ago, held our breath, and within 24 hours, we had over 100 applications from communities the length and breadth of New Zealand. It's been picked up by the TV. There's a guy here, Mike Hosking, who's very famous here, even more Marmite than I am in the UK. And he's like a cross between Piers Morgan and Andrew Neil. And he just endorsed it. He just went for it and just said, my God, the Brit is giving back. He hasn't been here very long. And that endorsement meant so much in this very small country. It's the same size as the UK, but the population here is half the population of London. So you get an idea for how intimate communications are. So, Stephen, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I think we have got here now a communications platform that will help Kiwis as we move to the new reality.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the can-do spirit, and the reason why I wanted to speak to you was I'm doing this, and we'll be releasing this as part of the Drums Can-Do Festival, where we're trying to inspire business leaders to continue on and to innovate. And I wonder, do you think when there's so much uncertainty in the world is going through, we're trying to figure out a lot of answers. Do you think now is a good time to really embrace challenge and try to start up opportunities like this?
Well, absolutely. I would put it a slightly different way. I think we've all had a very, very nasty shock, and I think the lid has been lifted off a world that actually was quite unattractive. Mm-hmm. And I think only stupid people will consider that we will go back to the norm, the old way of doing things. I think this is a massive opportunity for positive people, energetic people, to go, okay, yeah, that wasn't really working, was it? And so what do we do going forward? And you've only got to look at what's happened around the world to big corporations, to airlines that are folded or are folding. And we all thought, oh, that's got to be a good business. And then you look at making cars, oh, you think that's a good business. But, so many of the really big businesses actually had massive debts. They were actually being run in what you might say was an irresponsible way, because when this happened, they couldn't survive. I am a massive supporter of small to medium-sized businesses. And we saw in the UK a concerted effort by the regime, as I call it, to destroy the SME backbone of the UK economy. That is a matter of record. That is not a Noel Edmonds opinion. We saw what RBS did through the GRG. We know what the banks were doing to small businesses. The SME Alliance will tell you about the huge damage that was done to the economy, but also lives were destroyed. And the only way we are going to come out of this, certainly in my new homeland of New Zealand, is by focusing on small businesses. We have to encourage people to really create their own entrepreneurial ideas, and we have to give them the right platform to deliver on it. We are not going to get to the new reality with a robust economy in New Zealand or the UK if we rely upon the old corporate network.
Well, I think that ties nicely into when I'm thinking about that in a media perspective, you certainly have your opinions on the BBC of late, and at one point you were talking about pulling together a consortium to buy and privatise the BBC, but that was because you didn't think it was working. How do you see the BBC since you were talking about that? Has that changed at all, or do you still think that the licence fee is not sustainable?
Well, my comments at that time were made with affection and gratitude for a very long career with the BBC. I remember being on Newsnight and Paxman having a real go at me. And then it was about 18 months later that he was saying all the same things I'd said, that the BBC in its form was not sustainable. And I was frightened for it. And I'm very, very frightened for it now, because I cannot see how the financial model of the BBC is sustainable. I couldn't see it then. And now, of course, what have we got now? We've got a situation where even ITV are saying, is our model sustainable? So when you've got the BBC having now to ask people over 75 to pay for it, and I saw Lord Hall's comments, I don't know whether it's true, but he was sort of intimating, well, maybe people should pay what they could afford to pay. It's unfortunately not related to the world of Amazon, Netflix, Apple, the world we're now in. I think it would be a massive tragedy if the UK lost the BBC. So what we've got to do is we've got to make it fit for purpose, and it should be of a size that it can hold government and politicians to account. It must be independent, and it's made decisions in the last few years which lead a lot of people to think it's not very independent.
Well, what happened to that idea then? Did it just fizzle out? Did the consortium go away? Where did that lead to?
No, the idea came about because at the time I actually had a lot of connections in Monaco with some very, very wealthy people. And there was a genuine desire to save the BBC. Now, of course, it requires a royal charter to change anything. The BBC management always hide behind the existence of the royal charter. But what an absolute disaster it would be if we were to lose the BBC. And I think it's beholden upon all of us to actually grow its status on the world stage. I'm frightened for it. I'm frightened for its future. But I think a smaller BBC could be one of the real media powerhouses on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think most would agree with you that it at least needs to change its commercial model, if not its revenue generation. And with the challengers that have come up, then surely it is going to have to implement some sort of new strategy in the future. It's very stuck in its ways, would you say?
Well, I have a huge sympathy for the people that end up managing the BBC, because it happens to all of us, you know. The passage of times can lead to you being redundant or irrelevant. It happens to individuals. It happens to people who present TV and radio shows. It certainly is happening to the BBC. You know, what did we get when we got online? What happened? The listener, the viewer became king. We can now access all of the information and entertainment we could possibly want on a phone, a tablet, a desktop. Probably comes out your fridge and your toaster as well. You've got smart speakers around the house. So everything Lord Reith talked about when he established the BBC is actually irrelevant now, because the BBC used to talk at us, used to provide us what it felt was correct and proper. Well, we, the consumer, now decide all that. So it's got a massive challenge to be, dare I say it, relevant.
Another establishment that you've taken on in recent years has been Lloyds, where you challenged the "by your side" tagline, and the ASA found against you for that, but you've continued that battle onwards. Can I ask you, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and where is that currently at?
What am I trying to achieve? I'm trying to achieve the return of my stolen goods. Without going on for ages, Stephen, and you nodding off over your cup of tea. And this is all factual. My unique group of companies were doing very well from sort of the millennia, the turn of the millennia, and in the early 2000s, we were taken out by some corrupt bankers. That is not an opinion. They went to jail. It is a matter of fact. And that was HBOS, which was acquired by Lloyds. Where this becomes very unpleasant for me and for at least 200 other victims, I personally believe we could be talking about thousands, but the documentation suggests there are at least 200, is that Lloyds Bank knew about the criminality that was systemic in HBOS, and they covered it up. And that, again, is a matter of fact, something to do with Sally Marston, Lord Turnbull report. It makes it clear that there was a massive cover-up. So where are we today? A guy called Cranston, Sir Ross Cranston, was brought in to give his opinion of the review process that Lloyds Bank had introduced. He was damning in his report that was published just before Christmas, and he made a series of recommendations for victims' losses, direct and consequential, to be reassessed by an independent panel. That process is going on now. I applaud the fact that Antonio Horta Osorio, the chief executive of Lloyds, who I've attacked on many occasions, has now publicly said Lloyds Bank will stand by the findings of the panel. So we now have victims, including myself, who are waiting for that panel to review our cases. And who knows, it could be for me by the summer of this year that I can close a 16-year chapter, which has been a very dark cloud in my life.
Yeah, it must be very stressful to have gone through all of that.
Well, it is, because we had actually built a really good group of companies. And when they folded, I just thought I was a shit businessman. And I think my CEO and my senior management all thought we were crap at what we were doing. And then, in 2017, you suddenly find out that a judge at Southwark Crown Court is nailing these people, and you go, oh, wow. Oh, blimey, it actually was a plot. It's inconceivable. You sort of, in those days, call me an idiot, but, you trusted your bank manager, you trusted your advisors, you trusted these people in their ivory towers in the city. But you then realised they were up to all sorts of malarkey to line their pockets or to boost the balance sheet of the bank. And that was a hell of a revelation 3 years ago. And I'm determined, there is no way I am going to let down any of the other victims. There was a story last year that I'd settled. That's not true. And I am part of this review process. And I'm not just doing it for Noel Edmonds. I'm doing it because hundreds of us, and I think thousands actually, were very, very wrongly treated. And there's a big review coming out, Dame Linda Dobbs' review, which started off, let's give you an idea of the scale of this issue. The review under Dame Linda Dobbs started with 4 lawyers supporting her. She's a retired High Court judge, investigating Lloyds Bank. There are now 56 lawyers, QCs, barristers, solicitors supporting her, and it's been delayed by a year because they have found so much evidence. And that will probably now, it's been delayed because of the current situation, that probably will now not be published till next year. But next year, hopefully victims will see people being charged and given over to the courts, and hopefully the courts will put a few people away. Only that way will the City of London tidy itself up.
Well, let's move on to happier times then. Can I go back to one of the things that I think people would agree with is you're a very innovative and your ideas driven throughout your career, and one of the major successes was Noel's House Party. And I'm curious, how did you go about getting that commissioned? Because it ran, huge success, but I can't imagine something like that being commissioned today. So I'm curious how that came about.
Well, you're so right. My God, whether you call it the golden age of radio, golden age of television, I was really fortunate to have a career during the golden period of broadcasting in the UK. And I'd been doing a Saturday night show, which quite a few people have forgotten. Well done them. In fact, I can't remember much about it, called the Saturday Night Roadshow, produced by my very good friend Michael Lego and a great team. And I wanted to get back to doing live, and the BBC on Saturday nights were being beaten up by ITV, Scylla, Michael Barrymore, big shows, great stars. BBC One was being thumped on a Saturday night. And Mike came down to where I was living in Devon. We had a very nice couple of days, I think it was, a few bottles of this, that, and the other. And I'd acquired this ridiculous Victorian mansion on this estate in Devon, and I couldn't afford to do it up. But we wandered around it, and I was sort of telling him, well, one day we'll do this, one day we'll do that, and whatever. And I said, oh, and then we'll have house parties. And we kind of both looked at each other, and it was like, oh, that's quite an interesting idea, isn't it? Yeah, well, we ought to get camera. I think this was about the 5th bottle of Chablis or whatever. And, well, we could get lots of guests coming in here, and we could have cameras in and whatever. And then it just developed, and it seemed a great idea. And the best ideas are the ones that you can describe almost in a sentence. And so what is it, as it turned out? Demented, hairy little bloke lives in great big house outside the village of the damned, and on Saturday nights tries to hold a party, and different people come to the door. And that was it, really. And very fortunately for me, I mean, so fortunately, it was a blooming hit out of the box. I never forget that very first show live. I finished, the audience were going like, what the hell was that? Mike came down from the gallery and we hugged in the fire lane, and he said, do you know what, I think we got away with it. But if you don't mind, I'll tell you the story. You might have heard it, but I just love the story that Jim Moyer, who was the head of Light Entertainment, went on to probably be the most successful controller of Radio 2. But Jim said, so what's this all about, guys? And we went into his office. Mike had a single A4 sheet of paper, basically describing what we wanted for a pilot show. And it said, we're going to do this, that, and the other, and it'll probably run 90 minutes, and it'll have these elements, and we're chatting through. And he goes, okay, what's this going to cost? And I think Mike said 350,000. He said, what, for a pilot? Can I use it? Can it be used? And he said, we said, no, unfortunately, Jim, it can't be used because we're going to try all this stuff, and then it will be live if you commission it. And he went, 350 grand. And that equated to a two Ronnies, or one of those big LE shows and whatever. And I remember him saying, all right, okay, right, 350,000. Yeah, fine. And he's only got a single sheet of A4 paper, right? And we turned to walk out like two boys who'd been to the headmaster. And we got to the door, and it was like one of those really bad old movies. We put our hand on the doorknob, and he just said, oh, guys. And we turned and looked at him, and he said, don't fuck up. And that was it. And we went away, made a pilot. It was a damn good pilot. We dropped lots of stuff, and it came together. And, you've intimated, and certainly it was the case, that was an incredible period where, off a sheet of A4 paper with no focus groups, no commissioning editors, the head of the department had total faith in a brilliant producer and an average presenter. And it just came. Stop nod. I can see you nodding. You were meant to go, no, not average. It was an extraordinary experience, the beginning of that. And I'm very proud of it. And despite the attempts of certain tabloid newspapers, I've never, ever been critical of Ant and Dec. And Ant and Dec have been hugely generous in recognizing that they sat down with the tapes. They went through the old tapes of House Party, and they formulated a hugely successful Saturday night takeaway. And, it's funny, isn't it, how different areas of the media like to attack you if you're successful with something. There's no animosity there. There's no animosity from me towards the BBC. I had 30 sensational years, and I think the way Ant and Dec took the principles of House Party forward was absolute brilliance.
And you were describing the House Party format, and it sounds to me almost like it could work today in terms of people are all at home, we can all be connected, but we can have virtual house parties now, and people can drop in and out. I wonder if that format might work in the modern age.
No, it won't work for a number of reasons. And the reason why I'm so quick to say it won't work is because the world has changed. It has changed enormously. We used to have a waiting list for the audience of 400. And people would come in. Sometimes they had a bag with a change of clothes, just in case they were going to get gunged or something happened. The stars that came to the door were, by and large, A-listers. They were certainly the big names of British television and Hollywood. And everything's so ordinary now. I mean, if you open the door, who would get a whoop? Dominic Cummings? Who would get excited about someone at the door? And you couldn't do that show and drop a load of shit on people's heads, because the compliance would say, oh no, somebody's going to be upset because their Dior handbag was spoilt or their coat was stained or whatever. We created something which was of that moment in British social history.
And I know my colleagues will kill me if I don't ask. The rumour was always that you were quite annoyed with the creation of Mr Blobby and the success of that. I doubt that's true, though. What are your feelings towards looking back on that character?
Mr Blobby was created by Michael Lego. It was a character developed for a series of gotchas, and the idea was there was this completely anarchic children's character who would basically wreck the attempts of adults to explain things kids might be interested in. So we had Wayne Sleep trying to explain what the ballet was about, Valerie Singleton explaining money, Will Carling trying to explain rugby, and then that was how the character started. Nobody thought it would take off as a character in its own right. And would I actually object to the fact that it was so hugely successful? Why? Why would I object to that? Am I so fragile that I would think that a 6-foot lump of rubber was eclipsing whatever performance I was attempting? No, Barry Killerby inside Mr. Blob. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that, should I? Mr. Blobby and Mrs. Blobby, and now the kids have grown up. You know, they became personal friends, and I've always been very grateful for the millions of pounds they made me.
Well, I will admit to being one of the school children that sent his single to #1. I think I bought it twice. So yes, I wish I.
Well, Gary Barlow still will not talk to me because we not take that off the Christmas spot.
This is a terrific pub quiz question. I've definitely had that one.
Yeah, yeah. I think Blobby was for a while the only record that went to #1, came off #1, and went back to #1.
Incredible. And to move on to,
but Stephen, actually, you know, to give you an idea of just how relaxed I am or enthusiastic about Blobby, they talk about Blobby in New Zealand.
really?
You know, I've done a couple of interviews here, and the hosts have said, "You're not bringing him as well. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're very welcome. It's lovely to have you and Liz here, but you're not bringing him, are you?"
If you could pass me on his agent's details, though, I'd love to get him for an interview at some point.
Yes, yeah. Well, you'd find it probably a lot more interesting than than what I'm giving you.
This is great. Another major success. Then I have to talk about Deal or No Deal, one of the most successful TV show formats ever. How did you get involved with that? And were you? I mean, I'm sure you're often asked, did you expect it to be the success? How could you? It was such a monster. Can you talk a bit about how that came into your life?
Yeah, well, I left television. I always said I'd get out of television when I was about 50, and I did do that. And then I set up Unique Group, and I had business interests. And then we had this run-in with these corrupt bankers. But I was living in France, and in 2005, I got a phone call from John Miles, who's been my agent, but he's actually a best mate. And he said, "Look, Channel 4 are really interested in you doing Deal or No Deal." What's that? And they'll send you a VHS tape. That gives you an idea. And I sat there in France watching the French version, which was like seeing dear old Bruce Forsyth on some sort of illegal drug. It was just horrible. It went on for 2 hours. And I thought, what the hell's that about? I really don't want to come back to telly to do that. So I said no. I then got approached by Endemol and Channel 4 saying, "Look, please, would you be prepared to do it?" Now, I know all the stories are that Chris Evans turned it down, Jonathan Ross turned it down. I mean, bless them, but the truth of the matter is, and Endemol would verify it, they wanted me to do it, but I kept turning it down, and they were getting nearer and nearer to the recording time in October of 2005. And then Peter Bazalgette called me, he was then boss of Endemol, phoned me in France and said, "Look, Noel, we want you to do it. Would you please come to London. And so I hopped on a plane, went to London to be polite, because I thought I'm being very rude now, and I'm not a rude person. And I sat in this office in Shepherd's Bush, and I got it. I absolutely got it. And Glenn Hugill, who went on to be the banker, was the executive producer, and I got it. Because I was always concerned that once somebody had dealt, what the hell had you got? What was the show? And the concession they made, and I'm very grateful to Endemol and Channel 4, is that I said, this is not about opening the boxes. In some respects, it's not even about the money. It's about the people playing the game. And I want to turn it into a people show. And they tweaked it around, because it was unlike any of the other world formats, certainly unlike America, where Howie Mandel's doing it with supermodels and briefcases. We turned it into a people show. And I think that's why it ran for nearly 3,000. That's why it lasted for 10 years, because you could sit at home and empathize with the player. And you would be going, deal, no, you can go further and whatever. And that's what telly is about. And will we ever have telly like that again? Possibly not. But I've never doubted that the ability of a very small team of people down in Bristol to create magic was utterly extraordinary. I don't know how many people know, but we used to record them over a 5-month period, and some weeks we recorded 17 at a time. And no one, Tipping Point, any of the other shows, Pointless Web, no one ever in the history of making that style of television has ever done as many as we did. 300 in 5 months.
Sounds like a lot of work.
I was absolutely screwed. By the end of, we did 17 for a week. We'd do 3 on a Monday, 4 on a Tuesday, 3 on a Wednesday. We did it like that. And then we'd do 2 weeks, and then we'd have a week off. And I said to Liz so many times, when I come home on that second Friday, never let me sign a contract, never let me make a commitment or two to anything, because my head is now empty. I mean, Stephen, when all is said and done, we were only opening bloody boxes. There's not a lot you can say. There wasn't a script. There weren't even questions for me to hide behind a card like dear old Chris did on Millionaire. For fuck's sake, we were opening boxes. Luckily, I never knew what was coming out of the box.
But what great television it made. It was fascinating to watch every episode.
Yeah, and I look back on it with so much affection, because Channel 4 were very, very open about the fact they could no longer afford to do it. Jay Hunt said, look, I'll show you all the accounts. I'll show you everything. We feel it's come to an end. And I said, I think it's come to an end. I think I've come to the end, but can we end this wonderful, wonderful success run with some dignity? And the dignity was that she said, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd like to do 10 shows from different locations. And we ended up doing the last Deal or No Deals down a cave in Cheddar Gorge, on the Flying Scotsman, on a 737 out over the Atlantic. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing to do. And I remember the very last show that was recorded, the very last Deal or No Deal, actually, the guy won a penny. And the one that we recorded prior to that was actually up in Scotland. And the girl won $250,000. And I thought, isn't that incredible? After 10 years, the last 2 shows are the extremes of the game. And of course, it's telly, so we swapped them around when they were transmitted, and the $250,000 was the last one ever.
I didn't know that. I just assumed the last one was in Scotland, so that's amazing that you did that.
Yeah. It's I'm so grateful. I mean, Steve, how lucky am I that I've worked with all these sort of people? I was in Auckland this afternoon recording something for a daytime show promoting this radio network, and all they wanted to do was talk about these sort of shows. And the producer said to me, you're a genius. You had Swap Shop, you had telly addicts running. You had House Party, you had Deal or No Deal, all this sort of thing. You're a TV king. They were using stupid words like icon and genius. I said, no, you're missing the whole point. I had the most amazing production teams. I mean, you shouldn't believe your own publicity, but you cannot stand up in front of 17 million people on a Saturday night and claim it's only you. I mean, that'd be like the end of the cup final when the captain raises the cup and doesn't pay any notice to the other 10 guys that have helped win the match. It would be crazy. So I'm one hell of a lucky guy. I've had great production teams.
And I mean, I'm finished my cup of tea. I don't know how you are with your drink there, Noel, but I'll ask the last question because I appreciate it's your evening there now. But what would be, when we were talking about can-do spirits and people overcoming the adversity they're currently experiencing, what would be your advice for people out there in terms of just continuing on and just trying to achieve their dreams or just see themselves through this? Do you have any words for our viewers?
All I can say is based on my personal experience. I have tried over the years to get one or two of my opinions and views over, most of which were based on scientific fact, and I was called crazy. So what I would say is very personal. My dad, dear old Dudley, was astonished that his son wanted to be a disc jockey. That wasn't the thing to do back in the late 60s. And he said to me, well, just go and be the best one there's been. Now, I don't think I was the best one because Kenny Everett was undoubtedly the genius. But he also said, try your best and try a whole lot harder. And that was the beginning of me putting myself under pressure. And I think you have to put yourself under pressure and you have to ask questions. And you have to say to yourself every single day, well, what did I make of my life today? Or did I make another excuse? And until you can come to that honesty and you can come to that balance point with yourself, you will never, ever achieve anything. So I appreciate that. I'm struggling not to take it into the area where people go, oh, Edmonds, he's crazy. But I've learned so much about positive human energy in the last few years. And when people very kindly say, my God, you don't look like you're 71 and a half or whatever, and you always seem to be very up. Well, it's because I moved to living a very intuitive life. And what does that mean? You actually go by gut instinct. You don't allow yourself to be influenced by other people. And I have a rule about my opinions. You will never, even though I'm now living in New Zealand and it is my homeland now, you will never hear me say anything negative about the United Kingdom. That would clearly be unwise, it would be hypocritical and disingenuous. I feel that a positive outlook will get you almost anything, but it does take a lot of courage to give yourself totally to the intuitive. Why did that happen? Well, I'm not quite sure, this, that, and the other. I live by FKO. Facts give you knowledge that entitle you to an opinion. And so I keep my opinions to myself until I've acquired the knowledge from the facts. And then there's another one which is really scientifically proven, and that is that feelings come before thoughts, before actions. Now, these two things are relevant to the question you asked me, because you get feelings and you can't do anything about that. But you can think about those feelings and then you can take the appropriate action. And when in the past people have said, oh, Christ, you're crazy, Edmonds, you're mad. You've gone off like David Icke. I go, no, hang on a minute, bear me out. The fact is, you get a feeling that you want to go to the loo, don't you? You get a feeling and whatever, and you think, oh, I want to go to the loo. Well, then you do something about it. So you get a feeling, you get a thought, and you take an action. You get a feeling, I'm hungry. You think, I'm hungry. And then you take action. But now take it into the realms of when you wake up in the morning and you have a thought, what was the feeling? Was there something else going on in your energy field that produced that thought? So I know we're going off on one, but I think one of the great tragedies of modern society, and maybe it will change with everything that's now occurring, is we stopped being curious. So when I say some of these things, or when Greg Braden says some of these things, or when, for Christ's sake, read James L. Oshman's book about the body energy system, or James Lovelock, still with us at 100, he predicted everything to do with climate change. When people say, don't just dismiss them, be curious. And if I say something like that, then don't go to the default position of going, oh, Edmonds, he's crazy. Think, why would he say that? I'm going to find out about that. We have to be more curious as to how we've ended up with the biggest health and economic crisis and social crisis that human beings have ever faced. And I put the big emphasis on the social crisis, because if we are all suspicious of each other and we're not allowed to be near each other, what is life about? Is this a Perspex panel going to be the way we live from now on? Are we going to be frightened of a hay fever sufferer from now on? We've got to believe in ourselves. We've got to believe in each other a lot more.
Noel Edmonds, thank you very much for sharing a cup of tea with me, and good luck with the radio network. I hope it's a great success.
Stephen, you're very generous. I really appreciate your time, and you said some very complimentary and kind things, for which I am very grateful.
Well, I'll say thank you to our viewers as well for tuning in and listening to what has been a fascinating conversation for myself especially. Do stay tuned to the Drum website, where there'll be plenty more to come as part of the Can Do Festival. Lots more interviews around the Can Do spirit, but also innovation for businesses and how we come through all the adversity we face. Thank you very much.